haven't been making videos lately, I decided that I just needed to just dive right in and get this done because I've been working on this. I'm way behind schedule and when I was hoping to have this done. And it was helpful for me doing the videos, so it was good to be thinking through the code, but I found that it was slowing me down quite a bit, and I needed to kind of clarify what I was building before showing you guys. I was starting to realize that I kept going on these tangents because when we all code, we just go on these tangents because we're trying things out. And so I realized it was just taking too long and it was probably wasting your time as well. So I decided to just code it out. I busted ass a little bit the past few days, got it done, and so I want to show you what I've built and then go through the code and how I coded it. And I'm thinking that what we'll do for the saving section is we'll just keep it super similar, so a really similar layout, so you guys can see how I tackled similar problems. And you'll have a few different problems, but this way it should just make it a little easier for you to have some clarity on how to go forward with the building of it. So here we are. This is when the person enters the net worth section. This is the page that they'll come to. Now, initially, it's just this kind of boring telling them what we're going to be doing and that what their net worth is. Later on, when I actually build the product, I'm going to have a video that kind of walks them through and explains net worth, and that is hopefully quite a bit more interesting than just this boring page. So they'll do this, then they'll click here. Now, they need to add their different assets and liabilities. So as we were working on before in the videos, I created this add form, and then the change has been that I created this little display above because before I was adding it, but we couldn't see what had been added. So for instance, they might say that they have a TD checking account that has a few $1,000s in it. We could add that, so then they can see it up here. Then they've got a savings account that's also got a few thousand. We can add that. If they wanted to delete something, they could delete it just by clicking the little X there. TD, we'll add it back in. So they can add in their different cash assets. So in this section, I'm going to talk about when I'm going through the process with them, what a cash asset is and why we would need to know that as its own specific section. But for now, that's just the category that we've got here. So let's say they add these two items, then we go to the next one. They need to add their investment assets. So you can see here how the colors match up with the labels. I just kind of wanted to give a specific little feel to each one. In this case, it would be tax-free savings. We'll add something in here. Then they'll have their RRSPs. I'm just making up numbers. So one of the big things I managed to figure out was how to have this form be the same. So this add form is the same for every single one of these. And I'll show you how I did that. It definitely makes the code more complicated, but it reduces the code by a factor of like 1 out of 6, because I'd have to have 6 times the code to have each section have its own thing like this. And so it's kind of a trade-off. It's more complicated code, but there's way less of it, and that's what I personally like. But I'm curious what you guys think, what you would prefer. So we'll add this. Now, say for property assets, they have a house. So you'll see too, as we come through, if we went back, here they just had the current value of it. Now when we go into house, we've got a different list on the side, and they have the option to put in their purchase price as well as the market value. So that's where a little bit of the logic code came in. So we'll just say this is their primary residence and add that. Then we come into debts. For this one, we'll just say credit card debt. And now all of a sudden we've got popped up here the amortization. So that's the length of the loan for the debt as well as the interest rate. So that wasn't here before. So that's just another little thing which in this one component required a fair amount more logic to be checking out what kind it is before rendering these different little mini range bars. So we'll just say credit card. I'm just randomly throwing it in here. Blah, blah, blah. Add. Now here, I set it up so that they can see any of the other property that they had added. So they can see we added this earlier, the primary residence, 2 sections ago, and here we added this. So they called it primary residence, but if we called it Batman's cage, let's just go like this. If we added this in, now when we go here, we can see Batman's cage. So we can link the debt. We want to be able to link the debt to the specific item because that's really important because we want to know the equity of it. Now, you guys won't have a challenge like this in the savings section, but it's just an example of the type of challenges that we're going to be dealing with. So for Batman's cage, we'll just call it Batman's mortgage. And then here, I decided to go with gathering their mortgage details, which I can then pass over through the reducers to your section. So you'll be able to see what their mortgage payments are because I'm calculating that here. So it's pretty sweet because you guys don't need to calculate it. But then knowing this, that'll help a lot in the spending section because we'll be able to determine when their mortgage is due and when their spending would be done. So we can do a mortgage starting balance. And I'll just add in some more random numbers here. Interest rate, we'll make it that, boom. Then we'll add one for the primary residence. So the trouble is going to be keeping the user engaged to do all of this. But I think if they're at this point, if they're doing this, hopefully, or if they're wanting to do their financial planning, hopefully they see the value in adding all of these figures. So they'll add in their mortgage starting balance and then their current value. So we add that. Oh, we also need their amortization. Okay. Boom. Oh, another little thing that I did is if the title was a little too long, then the box is wide or higher. So that was just a little bit of logic that I had to do in styled components. So now when we go to the page, hopefully this works, boom. So they're at this page where they can see a breakdown of their debt, or not their debt, their assets and liabilities. Now we can see because they have so much property that kind of dwarfs the amount of their assets, which is helpful for somebody to know in their financial planning. They could say, wow, all of my assets are in property. Now another thing too, I have a mistake, or a bit of a mistake, because I added the mortgages quite a bit more than the value of the property, so that's messing up this this chart there. So I can click on them now and turn them down. Ooh, I don't know if this is working. Oh, I hope it doesn't crash. So maybe I can't turn them down. Uh-oh, I think it's crashing. I didn't link in these ones properly to the proper secured debt, so I have to refresh. Oh, sorry about that, guys. So the liabilities, I hadn't properly linked in to the asset, or not the assets, to the reducer. Let's see if I can exit them, if I can delete them. Yeah, so I can still delete them. And then I'm just going to go back in, or back a little bit, and so now they're still gone from here as well. I'll just add a smaller mortgage, just so that the charts line up a little bit better. Cool, let's see what that does. So because it's such a tiny mortgage compared to the value of their properties, you can see in this chart how small it is, but they can see when they'll hopefully have it paid off. They'll also have an idea of what their mortgage balance is, say when they're 51 years old. They could see that they would have about $22,000 in mortgage debt. And then if I won't try to edit it again because that'll mess it up, but then we can go back to assets by clicking here. We could click here and add a new TFSA, say, or a RESP, or non-registered. Let's just do that. So my goal is to make it very user-friendly and interactive. So then they could, if they wanted to change their TFSA, they could click that. Then they can change the chart and see how it plays out. Another thing too, this darker color represents their investments, and once they retire, they're going to start drawing from that. So I just have that calculated in here just to show their withdrawal. Whoops. So what your chart will look like is it'll be a bit different because we're going to have different types. It won't be like, so some will be higher and lower according to their different spending needs at different parts of their life. But the layout, I was thinking we'll try to keep it really similar. So we could just keep another one of these charts on the left that would show like a breakdown of their spending according to category. For instance, fixed debt, or fixed expenses. Sorry, it's so hard to switch in my brain between assets and liabilities to spending. but fixed spending on like housing costs, they can see a breakdown of their current spending patterns, maybe in a year, right here, and then the projection of their spending patterns over the course of their life. So this could be kind of our goal. Then I'm thinking that we could have, rather than assets and liabilities here, we could have fixed expenses and variable expenses, so they could get an idea of what their fixed expenses are. Those are expenses that we know happen every month, like a Netflix account or your mortgage payment or car payment. So those are way easier to nail down, whereas the variable expenses, in your case, will be difficult to nail down. And so maybe we would want to do a range. I'm not really sure the best way to do that. So as we go in, I'm just going to show you, give you a little tour on the components. So this component here, I think I call it the display. Let me see actually what I call it. The item display box is what I called this thing. And then I called these little guys items. So if you add an item, it's just a new thing. So account, we just add it. So we just added an item, and then this is an item display box. Now, one thing I did is I made it so that this box, it's the same component as this one. So there's just one set of code that's just being passed different information, but it's the same component. So that really cuts down our code, which is nice. And they're doing the same thing, but in this case, they're just being displayed, 3 of them beside each other, whereas here, there's just one being displayed. So that's helpful. Then if we add an item, this is the add form, and this is the same add form as these add forms. So it's all just one component. I'll just show you right here. So they're all the same component, the add form. So the add form is just one, but on the end page, they can still use it and add things. Then there's a different one, which is the edit form. So the difference between the add form and the edit form is the add one. Say we, oops, I think I'm editing. Here we go. I'm going to click on this one. So when we add, we're storing the data locally in this component. So I click checking account. That's being stored in a local state. And then Batman's checking account, that is being stored locally. So all of this is stored locally. Then when I click add, that's when it goes into the reducer, and then the reducer is then updating this and the charts. So that's being stored like that, whereas now if I edit it, if I click on it, now I'm going into the reducer where the state is stored and pulling that information. So I'm pulling the name Batman's checking account, and then now when I edit it, I'm changing it in the reducer. So now if I go like this, I'm changing it in the reducer, and it's changing the overall chart. So that's just something that will be similar for yours, because you're going to be adding an expense, say a car expense, and maybe they put it in and then they realize, oh wait, I forgot that it's actually this much. So they need to be able to go in and edit it really easily. And so you'll have a really similar layout there. And then how I'm doing it, it's kind of tricky to explain, but each item, first of all, maybe I'll do a walkthrough of my code, and then we can kind of incorporate that with this whole layout, and then we'll talk about how we could use how this works to be similar to what you guys are going to build. And then I'm also super open to any suggestions that you guys have on how I could refactor the code to make it even less. My dream is less code, but to keep it as tight as possible. I also appreciate Caleb's comment. I'm trying to comment on the code more. He said that I need to comment on it, and yes, I agree. Even I forget what I've been doing. I have frustrations when there's tons of comments in my code and I can't understand what's going on. But when I'm done, I like to go through and comment it. So yeah, so I will go through and give you guys a tour of my code in the next video.